The laughter stung more than the shove. It wasn't loud, not really, just a muttered snicker drifting from a uniformed mouth. But in the hushed stillness of the bus terminal, it cut deeper than any open insult. The tiled floor smelled of bleach and gasoline, a raw chemical mix that clung to the air. Above, fluorescent bulbs hummed in steady mockery. The building's glass walls reflected the morning light with too much clarity, offering nowhere to hide. Dr. Samuel Carter adjusted the cuff of his jacket, pretending not to notice. He bent slightly, slipping his worn leather satchel onto the bench beside him, careful as though it were fragile. Years of research, manuscripts, and grant proposals had passed through that bag. Today it held something else, documents of appointment, contracts waiting for his signature. Yet in the eyes of those watching, it might as well have been empty. "Wrong stop for you, Professor?" The officer's voice rolled across the tiled hall, light but edged with steel. Samuel did not look up. His fingers smoothed a crease from his trousers, deliberate, buying time. To answer too quickly was to surrender power. To delay too long was to invite escalation. The officer, Stockton, his badge said, shifted his stance with theatrical weight, boots striking echoes against the floor. Commuters slowed. A mother clutching her toddler's hand froze in mid-step. A delivery man set down his box as though waiting for spectacle. A young couple whispering over train schedules grew silent. The terminal, moments ago filled with the everyday hum of travel, now pulsed with expectation. "I asked you a question," Stockton pressed. He was broad, pale-skinned, his jaw stiff from years of chewing resentment like tobacco. He pointed toward the satchel. "Bag like that, suit like that. Doesn't fit. What's in it?" Samuel inhaled quietly. He was tall but lean, the kind of frame built not for confrontation but for endurance. His eyes carried lines of long study, of nights spent alone with books instead of people. He lifted his gaze, slow as dusk, until it met the officer's. A simple look, nothing more. Yet in its steadiness, there was defiance. "No contraband," Samuel said, voice low, steady. The officer's lips twitched. He stepped closer, hand brushing the holster at his hip, though the gesture seemed more habit than need. "That's not what I asked." A shift rippled through the air, tension folding in on itself. The mother tugged her child sharply away. The delivery man's thumb hovered over his phone camera, uncertain. Silence expanded, pressing against every chest. Samuel could feel it, the weight of judgment cloaked in uniform authority. The old lessons of his father whispered in his ear. Endure, endure, until endurance becomes victory. But endurance had a cost. The cost was silence, and silence had nearly broken him before. He straightened, though the movement felt like betrayal to his own body. His voice carried further this time, enough for witnesses to hear. "Inside my bag are academic papers, appointment letters, nothing unlawful. I will not consent to any search." Stockton's laugh was short, hard. "Academic, huh? That what you call it now?" The second officer arrived then, younger, restless, eyes darting between faces in the crowd. Officer Keene. He circled Samuel like a shadow, peering through the glass of the satchel with exaggerated suspicion. "Could be forged documents. Could be stolen," he said, tone practiced, rehearsed. Samuel held still. Every instinct screamed to defend himself with words sharper than blades. Instead, he placed his palms on the satchel, the gesture quiet, protective. His heartbeat rattled like loose change in his chest. "Stand up," Stockton ordered. "Slowly." The command tore through the terminal. Conversations ceased. Even the distant hiss of arriving buses seemed to hush. Samuel rose with careful grace, his height placing him almost level with Stockton's sneer. He did not flinch, though heat burned along his neck. A woman near the ticket counter whispered, "He didn't do anything." But her voice was swallowed by fear. Phones lifted higher, red record lights blinking. The truth had found witnesses, but witnesses did not always save. Stockton leaned closer, his breath bitter with coffee. "You don't belong here, Carter. Men like you don't just walk into town with fancy titles and expect respect." There it was. The truth beneath the performance. Not suspicion of crime, not fear of threat, but resentment dressed as law. Samuel's jaw locked. He wanted to tell them who he was, that in less than an hour he would be introduced as the new director of the city's Public Policy Institute, the first outsider chosen after decades of insular appointments. That the mayor himself had signed his contract, desperate for reform. That he had earned every word on the pages inside that satchel. But to reveal it now, under duress, would taste of desperation. Respect begged for was respect already lost. "I'll ask you one more time," Stockton said, hand now firmly resting on his weapon. "What's in the bag?" The pause stretched. The fluorescent bulbs buzzed. Samuel's throat tightened with the urge to scream, to break the silence that had defined too many years. He imagined his father's face, the quiet man who once told him, "Recognition never arrives on demand. It must be taken at the right moment." And then, the pivot. From the corner of his vision, Samuel caught movement. A girl, no older than 17, raising her phone high. Her lips trembled, but her hands held steady. She mouthed 2 words toward him, invisible to the officers. "I'm recording." The smallest gesture. Yet in it bloomed something rare. Recognition. Not respect, not yet, but acknowledgement. Proof that he was seen, not erased. Samuel adjusted his stance. He did not move his bag. He did not lower his gaze. For the first time that morning, he allowed a thread of steel into his voice. "You already know what's in there," he said. Stockton blinked, just for a moment. A crack in certainty. A hesitation. The crowd felt it, leaning forward with collective breath. The air thickened with possibility, suspended like the second before a storm breaks. And then silence closed in again, heavy, unfinished. Rain threatened but never fell. The sky above the terminal turned a dull pewter, light diffused into a haze that flattened everything beneath it. Samuel Carter stood motionless, his satchel anchored beneath his hand, the officers circling like restless dogs. The crowd's eyes weighed heavy on him, some sympathetic, most wary, all waiting for a crack. "Identification!" Stockton barked, louder now, as if sound could mask uncertainty. "Produce it, slowly." Samuel's pulse climbed, but his movements remained measured. He slid one hand inside his jacket, careful, deliberate. The leather wallet emerged like an artifact, worn at the edges, its weight familiar. He flipped it open, revealing not only his driver's license, but the folded appointment letter the mayor had signed. He offered the wallet forward without words. Stockton snatched it, squinting as though the print itself conspired against him. "Dr. Samuel Carter," he read aloud, spitting each syllable. His eyes lingered on the letterhead visible in the fold. His lips thinned. He shoved the wallet toward Keene. Keene tilted his head, studying it. The young officer's expression shifted, uncertainty mixed with recognition, but his mouth remained silent. Stockton's authority filled every gap. "You forged this," Stockton said flatly. "People like you don't step into positions like that. Not here." The words struck like fists, though Samuel gave no outward sign. He knew the truth of Stockton's thinking. A man of his color, his history, his voice, was not supposed to carry credentials that spoke of power. Every inch of his life had been a contest against that assumption. The crowd edged closer. Phones hovered higher. A contractor in dusty jeans muttered, "That's enough," under his breath, but not loud enough to challenge. A woman in a red scarf whispered, "Look at the letter. It's official." Still, silence drowned them all. Keene shifted uneasily. "Sir," he murmured toward Stockton. "Maybe we should verify." "Quiet!" Stockton snapped, cutting him down. His authority pressed outward, a shield against any doubt. He turned back to Samuel, eyes glittering with cruel intent. "You think you can walk in here, wave papers, and expect respect? Not in my city." The terminal doors hissed open. A gust of cold air rushed through, scattering tension into brittle fragments. A man in a charcoal coat stepped inside, briefcase clutched, unaware of the scene unfolding until silence forced his eyes toward it. He froze, watching. His presence added weight to the growing semicircle of witnesses. Samuel stood straighter. His cheek burned from humiliation, though no hand had struck him. Humiliation was subtler here, sharp as glass hidden in bread. He let his voice carry just enough to reach the bystanders. "You have no probable cause," he said, each word slow, distinct. "No crime committed, no law broken, and you know it." Gasps stirred the crowd. Someone whispered, "He's right." The red scarf woman lifted her phone higher, angle precise, her expression sharpened by outrage. Stockton's face darkened, blotched red. He stepped close enough that Samuel could see the cracked skin around his lips, smell the sour bite of caffeine and anger. "You don't tell me what I know," he hissed. The weight of his hand on the holster grew heavier, not yet drawn, but close enough that the message was clear. The girl with the phone, 17, trembling, invisible until now, called out, "It's all on video. Everyone sees it." Her voice cracked, but her courage struck like lightning. Every gaze turned toward her, including Stockton's. The pause stretched, and in that pause, something shifted. The crowd, once passive, leaned toward solidarity. Their silence bent into murmurs, disapproval threading into the air. Phones became shields, lenses bearing witness. Samuel felt it, the balance tipping. For the first time, Stockton's certainty faltered. His sneer twitched, not from arrogance but calculation. He was no longer the sole author of this performance. Keene, young and still salvageable, broke rank. "Sergeant, maybe we should let him go. Too many cameras." His voice carried farther than he meant, but it cracked the facade. Stockton turned on him with venom. "You questioning me?" Keene's lips parted, then closed. His silence was an answer in itself. Samuel chose his moment carefully. He bent, lifted his satchel from the bench, and slung it over his shoulder with slow dignity. His jacket shifted, exposing a faint glint beneath, metallic, official, though hidden too quickly for most to see. One man near the door squinted, uncertain whether he had imagined it. Samuel looked Stockton in the eye. "You're finished here," he said, quiet enough for only the closest ears. Stockton froze. Not fear, not yet, but recognition, sharp and unwelcome. He stepped back half a pace, boots grinding against the tile. The faintest tremor betrayed him. The atmosphere swelled with suspended energy. The crowd leaned closer. Phones caught every flicker, every twitch, every tremor. Even the fluorescent hum seemed to hush, as if waiting. Keene swallowed hard. His voice, barely audible, broke the silence. "What if he's telling the truth?" The question hung in the stale air, dangerous and unfinished. The bus terminal had grown into a theater. Every sound, every cough, shuffle, and whisper echoed like a cue line. Samuel Carter stood at its center, his satchel slung tight, his shoulders squared. He had given Stockton nothing but calmness, yet calmness itself had become a threat. Stockton's jaw locked, the muscle twitching near his ear. His authority, once solid, now cracked under the weight of eyes. Witnesses had multiplied. A trio of college students at the coffee kiosk angled their cameras toward him. The mother with her toddler had not left, though fear kept her pressed against the wall. And the girl, 17, pale, trembling, still held her phone high, her courage luminous in its fragility. Keene lingered just behind Stockton, shifting from foot to foot, his gaze flickering between Samuel and the crowd. He was learning the weight of silence, the kind that condemns without words. "You don't walk away," Stockton said finally, voice low but vibrating with strain. "Not until I'm finished." Samuel did not move. The words he had spoken still lingered, sharper than any weapon. "You're finished here." His father's lessons whispered again. Dignity doesn't need a stage. It needs a witness. Today he had both. "I've complied," Samuel replied, tone even. "You've inspected my identification. You have no grounds." The words carried, bouncing against the tile. They reached the ears of the man in the charcoal coat by the entrance. He leaned forward, his own phone raised now, capturing everything. The tide had turned. The performance no longer belonged to Stockton. But authority unravels slowly, like rope fraying strand by strand. Stockton's pride refused surrender. He stepped closer, hand brushing against Samuel's shoulder in a deliberate shove. The crowd gasped. The toddler whimpered. Someone shouted, "That's assault!" Samuel's balance faltered, but he caught himself, planting his feet firm. He did not raise his hands, did not retaliate. His composure remained unbroken, though inside his chest a furnace roared. "You resist, and I'll put you on the floor," Stockton growled, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Samuel leaned forward just enough that his words fell between them alone. "Try. And everything ends for you." The glint beneath his jacket flashed again, metallic, undeniable this time. A ripple passed through the witnesses nearest him. Recognition sparked, hushed, but alive. Not a weapon. Something else. Something official. The man in the charcoal coat whispered, "Badge." His voice carried more than he knew. A murmur rippled through the semicircle of onlookers. Stockton froze. His eyes flickered downward, then away. A single beat of hesitation, but long enough for the crowd to sense it, long enough to shift the scene entirely. Keene's face blanched. He stepped forward, words tumbling out before restraint could stop them. "Sergeant, he's not who you think he is." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Every camera lens tilted toward Stockton, hungry. Samuel let the pause stretch. He allowed the moment to breathe, to hang suspended. And then, slowly, he adjusted his jacket, just enough to reveal what gleamed beneath. A star-shaped badge caught the dull light of the terminal. Official. Authority undeniable. Gasps erupted. The girl with the phone lowered it in disbelief, whispering, "Oh my God." The mother clutched her toddler tighter, but her eyes brightened, relief mixing with outrage. Even the college students at the kiosk cheered under their breath. Stockton's face drained of color. His hand fell from the holster as though scorched. "No," he muttered, voice cracking. "No, that's not—" But denial found no ground. Every witness had seen it. Every phone had recorded it. Samuel lifted the badge higher, his voice carrying with quiet authority. "Dr. Samuel Carter, Director, City Institute for Public Policy, appointed this morning, and you've just profiled, harassed, and assaulted me in front of 30 witnesses." The words were not shouted. They did not need to be. They landed heavier than gunfire, each syllable a verdict. Keene stumbled back, his young face twisted with panic. Stockton's lips moved without sound, searching for defense where none existed. The crowd surged with noise, outrage, murmurs, disbelief. Phones rose higher. One man near the wall shouted, "We saw everything!" Another yelled, "It's on video, officer!" Samuel stood taller. His cheek still burned from humiliation, but his dignity gleamed brighter than the badge itself. He had not begged. He had not surrendered. Recognition had been forced into the open by truth alone. Stockton staggered, his boots scraping the tile. For the first time in 17 years, he had no script. Authority had slipped from his grasp, and in its place remained only fear. Samuel did not move toward him. He simply let the silence linger, let the shame wrap around Stockton like a noose. Outside, a bus hissed to a halt, its brakes screeching against pavement. Passengers filed off, wandering into a storm they did not yet know awaited them. Inside the terminal, the storm had already broken. Samuel replaced the badge beneath his jacket, its glint fading but its power unforgotten. He adjusted his satchel strap, turned toward the glass doors, and walked forward. Every gaze followed. Every phone recorded. Every heart in the room felt the shift. The line crossed. The balance forever altered. But as Samuel pushed into the gray light outside, he knew the confrontation was not finished. It had only begun. Respect had been forced, not granted, and that was the most fragile kind of all. Behind him, Stockton's whisper echoed, fractured and desperate. "This isn't over." Samuel did not look back. The sky threatened rain, heavy and waiting, as though the city itself prepared for a reckoning yet to come. And somewhere inside him, beneath the scars of silence, a fire caught and held. The rain finally broke. Fat drops hammered the pavement as Samuel Carter stepped into the gray morning, his satchel tight against his side. The air smelled of wet asphalt, diesel fumes, and the sharp tang of ozone. Behind him, the terminal still buzzed like a hive torn open, the echoes of outrage chasing his footsteps. He didn't slow. He couldn't. To pause would feel like weakness, and weakness was a scent men like Stockton hunted. The car waited at the curb, black, clean, anonymous. Inside sat Helen Ward, the mayor's chief of staff, her fingers drumming against the steering wheel. She rolled down the window, her eyes narrowing at his soaked suit and torn dignity. "You're late," she said. No warmth, no surprise, just irritation masking concern. Samuel slid into the passenger seat, water dripping from his cuffs onto the leather. He exhaled, the tension clinging like smoke. "Circumstances," he answered simply. Helen's gaze darted toward the terminal. Even from the car, the cluster of raised phones was visible through the glass, the flashing red dots of recording lights. "Tell me it wasn't what I think it was." Samuel rested his head briefly against the seat. "Worse." The car eased into traffic. Windshield wipers carved rhythmic arcs, slicing away rain but not unease. Helen's silence stretched, heavy as judgment. Finally she spoke. "You realize what that means. By noon, every screen in this city will carry your face." "Not mine alone," Samuel said. His tone held no triumph, only weariness. "Stockton's too, and Keene's. They handed me the story before I even set foot in the office." Helen glanced at him, measuring the damage. His cheek was red, scraped faintly where Stockton's shove had caught him. His jacket sagged from dampness, the faint glint of his badge now hidden. He looked less like a leader, more like a man who had survived something corrosive. "You wanted reform," she said softly. "Now reform has you." The words sat between them, unchallenged. The car wound through the city. Towers of glass and steel loomed, their mirrored surfaces fractured by rain. Banners promoting the Institute's new initiatives fluttered along lampposts, his name printed in bold type, already weather-stained by drizzle. Below, people hurried beneath umbrellas, their faces bent toward the storm. None knew that their new director had already been baptized in conflict before his first hour on the job. At a red light, Helen finally broke the silence. "The board will ask questions. They'll want assurance this doesn't compromise your ability to lead." Samuel turned his head toward her. His eyes, dark and steady, carried the weight of humiliation transmuted into resolve. "It proves exactly why I was hired. You don't need reports to show the disease in this city. You only need a video. Helen's lips pressed thin. Videos go viral. They also vanish. Memory is shorter than justice. Don't mistake spectacle for change. Samuel studied the passing buildings, their windows glowing faintly against the storm. Change doesn't begin in comfort. It begins exactly where they tried to break me. The car pulled into the Institute's underground garage. Security lights buzzed overhead, casting sterile shadows. Helen parked, but she didn't move. She fixed him with a stare. You have one chance to set the tone. Walk in there as a victim, and you'll be treated like one forever. Walk in as a leader, and maybe, just maybe, you'll survive this city. Samuel nodded once, adjusting his soaked jacket. Then let's begin. They entered the lobby, marble floors slick from rain tracked in by early arrivals. Staffers whispered as he passed, their eyes wide with curiosity, pity, or doubt. News had already started to spread, the kind that travels faster than truth. In the boardroom, a semicircle of faces awaited. Trustees, donors, city officials, each seated like judges cloaked in polite civility. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and strong coffee, but beneath it lay tension sharp enough to taste. The chairwoman, Evelyn Chen, tapped her pen against a folder. Her expression was unreadable, a porcelain mask honed by decades of politics. Dr. Carter, she said, voice cool, we expected you sooner. I was delayed, Samuel answered. He remained standing, his presence filling the room without theatrics. But I'm here now. A murmur passed through the trustees, the kind that questions before words even land. Evelyn gestured toward the seat at the center of the table. Samuel did not sit. Before we begin, he said, some of you may have seen or heard of an incident this morning. His voice carried steady, measured. He let the pause expand, forcing each face to meet his. Yes, it happened. Yes, it was recorded. And yes, it is already spreading. The air stiffened. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned forward, hungry for scandal. Samuel continued, his tone deepening. I will not recount every detail here. You will see it soon enough. What matters is this. I was profiled, harassed, and assaulted outside your doors before I ever set foot in this building. That is the reality we are tasked to change. Evelyn's pen stilled. Her eyes searched his face for weakness, for cracks, but he gave none. Respect, Samuel said, is not granted by title. It is earned through truth. Today, truth revealed itself in the ugliest way possible, and I intend to use it, not as a shield, not as a weapon, but as a foundation. This institute exists to confront injustice with policy. I intend to confront it with presence. The silence that followed was electric. Some trustees averted their eyes. Others nodded faintly, though hesitation lingered. Helen, seated near the end, studied him closely. She saw the exhaustion beneath his poise, the storm still soaking his clothes. Yet she also saw something else, the spark of defiance that turned humiliation into fuel. Evelyn leaned back, folding her hands. You've made your introduction, Dr. Carter. Now prove it wasn't just performance. Samuel inclined his head once, finally taking his seat. His satchel rested at his side, heavy not with papers alone, but with the morning's unshakable truth. The meeting began, voices rising in debate, questions flying like darts. But Samuel's mind lingered on the terminal, on Stockton's sneer, on the trembling girl's steady phone. The fight had found him, and it would follow. And beneath the polished table, his fists curled slowly, the quiet promise of a man unwilling to yield again. The storm outside raged on, tapping against the windows like a verdict still unfinished. The storm cleared by afternoon, but the city did not. Samuel Carter's face, scraped and solemn, already glowed across phone screens, tablets, and televisions. Grainy clips from the bus terminal spread faster than rumor. A shove, a badge flashing in the light, a silence turning into revelation. Headlines followed within hours. Director Carter confronted at terminal. New reform leader harassed by local police. Some networks used words sharper, less forgiving. Inside his office, glass walls opened to the skyline. Rain streaks clung to the windows, distorting the buildings beyond like a city glimpsed through tears. Samuel stood with his jacket off, shirt collar loosened, hands pressed against the sill. He had waited years for this post, prepared speeches, memorized statistics. But this morning had written a different speech entirely, one the world had already begun to read without his permission. Helen Ward entered without knocking, tablet in hand. Her heels struck sharp against the tile. "It's everywhere," she said flatly. "Every outlet. Some calling it proof of systemic rot. Others calling it exaggeration." She dropped the tablet onto his desk. "They'll want you on camera tonight." Samuel didn't turn. His reflection in the glass looked older than he felt. Tired, lined, but harder too. "If I go on camera now, it looks defensive, like I'm chasing the story instead of owning it." Helen crossed her arms. "And if you don't, it looks like weakness. Silence has a cost." The words pierced. Silence had always cost him. Jobs overlooked, ideas dismissed, respect withheld. This morning, silence had almost cost him more. He turned, his eyes steady. "I'll speak, but on my terms, not theirs." Helen studied him a moment, then gave a short nod. "The mayor wants to see you. He's nervous. For himself, not for you." Samuel slipped his jacket back on. The scrape on his cheek throbbed faintly, a reminder carved into flesh. He picked up his satchel and followed her out. The mayor's office sat 2 floors down, draped in oak panels and political gravitas. Mayor Franklin was a man of charm and calculation, his hair perfectly sculpted, his smile quick but shallow. He rose when they entered, arms wide in performative welcome. "Sam, what a morning." His tone was breezy, too breezy. "Quite an introduction to our city." Samuel didn't return the smile. He took the chair opposite the desk, his presence heavy. "It's not a performance, Mayor. It's reality. That's what your city showed me before I even put my hand on your door." Franklin's smile faltered, just slightly. He laced his fingers together on the desk. "Optics matter. You understand that. We brought you here to build trust, not to ignite scandal." Samuel leaned forward. His voice dropped into steel. "I didn't ignite anything. Your officers did. And now the city knows what they are." Franklin shifted, discomfort breaking through his polish. "People are quick to judge. A video doesn't tell the whole story." "Doesn't it?" Samuel asked quietly. "The shove, the slur, the doubt before recognition. It told enough." Helen stood by the window, arms crossed, watching. She knew this was the first test. Would Samuel bend to politics or hold to principle? Franklin tried a softer tack. "Look, the board trusts you. I trust you. But you have to give the city a message that calms, not inflames. Say it was a misunderstanding. Say tempers ran high. Ease people down." Samuel's silence cut sharper than any retort. He stared at Franklin until the mayor shifted again, his confidence unraveling. Then Samuel spoke, each word deliberate. "Respect isn't eased down, it's built up. You didn't hire me to soothe, you hired me to change." The mayor's mouth opened, closed. He searched for a reply but found none. Finally, he leaned back, exhaling through his nose. "Fine. Speak your way. Just remember, if you fall, I fall too." Samuel stood, adjusting his jacket. Then stand taller. He left without waiting for dismissal. Helen followed, the faintest curve of a smile touching her lips. Back in his office, Samuel sat at his desk, the weight of the city pressing through the walls. He opened his satchel, pulling out the appointment papers, still damp from rain. The ink had smudged slightly, but the signature remained clear. A contract with the city, yes, but more than that, a contract with himself. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "We saw what happened. They can't silence this. We're with you." Attached was a photo, a crowd gathering outside the terminal, candles lit despite the drizzle. Not protest, not yet. Vigil. Recognition in flame. Samuel stared at the screen, a knot tightening in his chest. Quiet strength under judgment. Hidden valor seen at last by strangers. But he knew flame could spread. It could illuminate, or consume. He rose again, moving to the glass. The skyline shimmered beneath clouds, neon signs blinking against gray. Somewhere out there, Stockton was reeling, Keene was unraveling, and the city itself was watching. Samuel whispered to his own reflection. Respect isn't granted. It's earned. Time to earn it. The rain had stopped, but the storm had only just begun. By dawn the next day, the city belonged to whispers. News anchors replayed the terminal footage until silence felt impossible. Radio callers argued over respect and authority, some voices trembling with outrage, others hard with denial. Coffee shops brimmed with debate. At bus stops, strangers leaned toward each other, muttering, "Did you see? Did you hear?" Inside the institute, tension coiled like wire. Staffers worked with heads lowered, avoiding Samuel Carter's eyes as he strode past. Some offered faint nods of solidarity, others pretended not to notice him at all. Everyone had seen the video, yet no one knew what it meant for them. Samuel's office door closed behind him with a hush. He dropped his satchel on the desk and pressed his palms against the wood. His reflection stared back from the polished surface, weary, unshaven, but steadier than yesterday. He had walked through humiliation and come out carrying proof. Proof was powerful, but dangerous. Helen Ward arrived moments later, arms full of newspapers, their headlines shouting in bold ink. She fanned them across his desk like cards in a rigged game. "National coverage," she said. "Some call you a symbol. Others call you a threat. Either way, you've got everyone's attention." Samuel skimmed the headlines. Director harassed before first day. Badge revealed, truth recorded. Another, harsher, outsider plays the victim. He lingered on that last one, jaw tightening. Helen leaned against the desk. "You'll be asked to testify. Internal affairs, maybe even federal investigators. Stockton and Keene won't survive this without dragging you deeper." Samuel's hand curled into a fist. "Then let them drag. I won't hide." Helen studied him. Her tone softened. "Strength is quiet, Sam. But quiet strength can be mistaken for silence. And silence costs," Samuel finished for her. His voice dropped into steel. "I've paid enough of that." A knock broke the moment. Evelyn Chen, chairwoman of the trustees, entered with her usual porcelain composure. She closed the door behind her, her tailored suit immaculate, her face unreadable. "Dr. Carter," she said, "we need to talk privately." Helen lingered, but Evelyn's eyes flicked toward her with authority. Reluctantly, Helen slipped out, leaving Samuel alone with the chairwoman. Evelyn crossed the room, her heels clicking sharp against the floor. She stopped by the window, hands clasped behind her back. "The Institute was built on reputation," she began. "Not scandal." Samuel remained seated, gaze steady. "Truth isn't scandal." Evelyn turned, her expression tight. "Perception matters more than truth. Trustees are nervous, donors even more. They fear instability."
Samuel rose, the scrape on his cheek catching faint light. Instability was here before me.
All I did was show it. Her eyes narrowed. You showed it in a way that forces sides, and when people are forced to choose, some choose to walk away. Then let them, Samuel said quietly. Those who remain will be the ones who believe in more than comfort. The words hung between them, waited. Evelyn studied him, searching for cracks, but found only resolve. Finally, she exhaled through her nose. Very well. But understand this. Your margin for error no longer exists. One misstep, and even your badge won't save you. Samuel's jaw tightened. I never expected it to. Evelyn left without another word, the click of her heels fading down the corridor. Samuel returned to his desk, lowering himself into the chair. For a moment, the silence felt crushing. Then his phone buzzed. A video link, sent anonymously. He tapped it open. The screen filled with footage from a different angle, security camera grain, black and white, but clear enough. It showed Stockton's shove, Keene's circling suspicion, Samuel's steady composure. It showed the moment of reveal, the badge gleaming like judgment. Every detail captured, undeniable. But at the end, the footage did not cut. It lingered. It caught something the phones had missed. Stockton, after the crowd dispersed, muttering into his radio. His face twisted, voice low but venomous. This isn't over. He won't last. Samuel froze, pulse hammering. Proof, yes, but proof of something darker. Stockton wasn't finished. A knock rattled the door again. Helen entered, reading his face instantly. What is it? He turned the screen toward her. She watched, her eyes narrowing, her breath sharp. Then he's plotting. Samuel nodded. And he won't plot alone. The silence thickened. Outside, the city buzzed, oblivious. Inside, the weight of what was coming pressed against the glass walls. Samuel leaned back, his voice a whisper not meant for anyone but himself. They tried to break me with silence. Now they'll try with noise. Either way, I'll answer. Helen met his gaze, her tone steady but edged with fear. Then prepare, because the next storm won't wait for you. The phone screen dimmed, the image of Stockton frozen in grainy defiance. Rain tapped faintly against the windows again, though the forecast had promised clear skies. The storm was returning, sooner than expected, and this time, it would not be contained by walls. Night fell heavy, dragging the city into a restless quiet. The Institute's lights glowed like lanterns on a watchtower, but inside Samuel Carter's office the shadows pressed close. The security footage replayed on his screen. Stockton's shove, the badge revealed, and then that venomous whisper caught by chance. He won't last. Samuel shut the laptop with a snap. The sound echoed in the stillness, like a gavel striking wood. He rubbed his temple, exhaustion clawing at the edges of resolve. Reform was never meant to be simple, but he hadn't expected open hostility before his first week was over. Helen Ward entered without knocking, 2 cups of bitter coffee in her hands. She set one on his desk and leaned against the window frame. Her eyes carried fatigue but also something sharper, defiance tempered by fear. You should go home, she said. Samuel shook his head. Home is where they expect me to hide. I won't give them that picture. Helen studied him. You realize what's coming. Stockton won't act alone. He'll rally the ones who see your appointment as an insult. Old guard doesn't surrender without blood. Samuel sipped the coffee, its bitterness grounding him. Then let them come. They'll expose themselves faster than I ever could. Helen didn't answer. She turned to the glass, watching the city lights scatter across wet streets. Her reflection looked fragile, lips pressed tight, shoulders drawn. Symbols attract fire, she said softly. And right now,
You're not a man to them. You're a symbol.
The words lingered. Samuel thought of the girl with the phone, her hands trembling but steady enough to capture truth. Of the candles flickering at the terminal last night. Of strangers whispering his name in cafes. A symbol, yes. But symbols cracked under pressure unless they became something harder. A sudden knock rattled the door. Helen spun, startled. Samuel's voice cut the silence. "Enter!" A young staffer slipped in, cheeks flushed. "Sir, there's someone here. He says he needs to speak with you." "Urgent." Samuel frowned. "Who?" The staffer hesitated. "Officer Keene." The name stiffened the air. Helen straightened, her jaw tight. Samuel rose slowly, every movement deliberate. "Bring him." Moments later, Keene stepped inside. He looked smaller without his uniform, plain clothes hanging loose, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. His hands shook faintly as he removed his cap, gripping it like an anchor. Samuel said nothing. He waited. Keene's voice cracked. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know who you were. Stockton told me to back him, said it was routine. I thought—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "I thought it would end like every other stop. Quick, forgotten." Helen's tone was sharp. "You mean buried?" Keene flinched but didn't argue. He looked directly at Samuel, desperation naked in his eyes. "When I saw the badge, I knew everything was finished. He broke off, clutching his cap tighter. "I can't sleep. I see it every time I close my eyes. His hand on your neck, your face against the floor. And I stood there. I let it happen." Samuel studied him, expression unreadable. "Why are you here?" Keene's breath came fast. "Because Stockton's planning something. He's furious. Says you humiliated him. Says you're a fraud. He's talking to others, officers who hate outsiders, who think reform means betrayal. They're going to push back. Hard." Helen's voice was cold. "And you expect us to believe you? After you played his shadow?" Keene's eyes brimmed, not with tears, but with shame. "I'm not asking forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to make it right. I'll testify. I'll tell them everything I saw, everything he said. But I can't do it alone. He'll come after me too." Silence stretched. Samuel walked slowly around the desk, stopping inches from Keene. His voice was low, deliberate. "You want redemption. But redemption costs more than confession." Keene nodded quickly. "Then tell me what to do." Samuel held his gaze, searching for truth beneath the panic. For the first time, he saw not arrogance, not hostility, but a boy trapped in a man's uniform. Loyalty weaponized, morality suffocated until it gasped for air. "You'll testify," Samuel said, "but not just to internal affairs, to the city. You'll stand where everyone can see and say what you saw. No half-truths, no excuses." Keene paled, fear clenching his jaw, but he nodded. "If that's what it takes." Samuel stepped back, his eyes hard. "Understand this. If you falter, if you retreat into silence, you'll be no different than Stockton. And silence has already cost too much." Keene's voice wavered, but conviction edged through. "I won't falter." Helen exhaled sharply, disbelief painted across her face. "You're trusting him?" "I'm not trusting him," Samuel said, his gaze still locked on Keene. "I'm testing him." The young officer lowered his head, cap twisting in his grip. "Then test me. I'll stand." The room settled into uneasy quiet. Outside, sirens wailed faintly, distant but approaching, as if the city itself warned them of the storm brewing. Samuel returned to his desk, reclaiming his seat with quiet authority. "Go home tonight," he told Keene. "Prepare yourself. Tomorrow you'll stand where silence once ruled." Keene swallowed, then turned and left, his steps uneven but determined. When the door closed, Helen faced Samuel, incredulous. "You're putting the fight in his hands? He could betray you again." Samuel looked out at the city lights, their glow fractured by glass. "Or he could show the city what redemption looks like. People must see that even those complicit can change. That's the only way reform holds." Helen shook her head, frustration rippling through her voice. "You gamble with lives, Sam. Yours. His, maybe mine." Samuel's tone was quiet, final. "Reform is always a gamble. The only certainty is the cost of silence." The office fell still again, the air heavy with unspoken fears. Outside, the sirens grew louder before fading into the distance, and Samuel Carter sat alone with the weight of choice, knowing dawn would demand more than speeches. It would demand courage, his, and now Keene's. The storm waited, patient but certain. Morning arrived without mercy. The sky was pale, drained of color, as though the city itself held its breath. Samuel Carter dressed in silence, each motion deliberate, the clean shirt, the dark tie, the jacket pressed smooth despite its wear. His satchel lay waiting by the door, heavy with documents, heavier with expectation. Outside the institute, a crowd had gathered. Not a mob, not a protest, something quieter but sharper. Students clutching notebooks, workers on break, coffee still steaming, strangers with candles they hadn't yet lit, waiting for the right moment. Phones hovered in nearly every hand, eyes fixed on the doors. Helen Ward walked at his side as they entered. Her expression was carved from iron, but her fingers flexed with restless energy. "The press is here," she said. "Trustees, too. And internal affairs. They'll all be watching." Samuel nodded once, steady. "Good. Let them watch." Inside the main hall, cameras lined the back wall like rifles. Reporters whispered to each other, pens poised, microphones glowing red. Trustees filled the front row, Evelyn Chen seated in the center, her posture flawless, her gaze unreadable. And standing off to one side, pale, trembling, yet upright, was Officer Keene. No uniform today, only a plain shirt, sleeves rolled, but his presence drew every eye. The murmur of the hall dimmed as Samuel stepped to the podium. He did not glance at the papers in his hand. He did not need them. His voice carried steady, weighted by everything the city had already seen. "Yesterday," he began, "you witnessed an event no one should ever endure. Harassment, humiliation, violence, not hidden in shadows but in daylight, not whispered, but recorded. You saw truth unfold before your eyes." The cameras blinked. The crowd leaned closer. "I stand here today, not as a victim of that truth, but as a servant of it. Respect cannot be demanded. It cannot be begged. It must be earned. Earned by honesty, by dignity, by the courage to face what we'd rather ignore." He let the words settle, breathing through the silence that followed. Faces shifted, some shamed, some galvanized. "And yet," Samuel continued, his voice deepening, "truth alone is not enough. It must be spoken. Silence costs too much. Too many have paid that cost already." He turned slightly, gesturing toward Keene. The young officer stiffened, eyes wide under the weight of attention. "Yesterday," Samuel said, "one man stood silent while injustice unfolded. Today he has chosen differently. Today he will speak." Gasps rippled through the hall. Reporters angled forward, cameras zooming. Keene stepped toward the podium, his face pale but resolute. Samuel moved aside, his presence a shield without words. Keene gripped the podium with both hands. His voice shook at first but steadied as he continued. "I was there," he said. I watched Sergeant Stockton shove Dr. Carter. I heard his words. I saw the lies forming before the badge was revealed. I stayed silent. That silence makes me guilty. The room hushed. No cough, no shuffle, only breath held tight. But I am here now, Keene pressed on, because silence doesn't erase what I saw. Stockton told me we'd bury it, like every other time. He said Dr. Carter didn't belong here, that he'd make sure of it. He said, he won't last. Gasps again, sharper this time. Evelyn Chen's mask cracked, her pen stilled. The cameras caught every word. Keene swallowed hard. I can't undo what I allowed, but I can tell the truth now. And I will. In every hearing, every court, every room that asks. Because if I don't, then I am Stockton, and I refuse to be him. His voice broke on the last line, but the silence that followed was not condemnation, it was recognition. Samuel stepped forward again, placing one hand briefly on Keene's shoulder, a gesture small, yet immense. This, Samuel said to the crowd, is what redemption looks like. Not comfort, not denial, but the courage to speak when silence would be easier. If reform means anything, it must mean this, that even those who faltered can stand again. That respect must be earned, not inherited, not assumed. Applause began softly, from the students first, then spreading outward. Reluctant at first, then louder, filling the hall until even the trustees could not ignore it. Evelyn Chen sat motionless, her expression unreadable. But her silence was no longer enough to smother the sound rising around her. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, but Samuel raised a hand and the noise fell away. I will not promise ease, he said. I will not promise comfort. Reform never begins in comfort. It begins in truth. It begins in the moment when we stop pretending respect can be given freely and admit it must be fought for. And today, that fight begins. The applause thundered again, rolling like storm against glass. Samuel stepped back from the podium, his breath steady despite the roar. He met Helen's gaze across the room. She gave the smallest nod, approval mixed with warning. Outside, the candles flickered to life, tiny flames against the pale sky. Strangers stood shoulder to shoulder, their silence now chosen, not forced. A silence heavy with meaning, alive with recognition. In that moment, Samuel Carter understood the cost he carried. The fight would not end here. Stockton would not fade quietly. The old guard would not surrender without claws. But for the first time, the city had seen not just humiliation, not just conflict, but transformation. Quiet strength under judgment. Misjudgment turned to redemption. Valor once hidden, now revealed. Respect not granted, but earned. The story was unfinished, but the turning had begun. Samuel straightened, lifting his satchel once more. The storm still brewed beyond the horizon, but the first light of change had broken through, and somewhere in the crowd, the girl from the terminal, 17, phone still in hand, watched with wide eyes. She lowered her screen at last, whispering to no one. He stood. The hall swelled with sound, unfinished yet undeniable. The door of change had opened, half, then wider. What came next would decide everything.